welcome viewers to yet another edition of Talk to the Nation here at Star TV Gambia. I'm your host Kausobaji, and with me today we have Mr. Gay and Mr. Kante. First, we start with Mr. Cherno Gay. Mr. Gay, welcome to Star TV, specifically on the Talk to the Nation.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, I would say, to the viewers. Good evening, Gambia, and good evening to Africa. I'm happy to be here, Kauso. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes, Mr. Kemo, yes. Welcome to Star TV.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baji. It's a pleasure to be here. Star TV is indeed a great platform for us, especially for the youths.
This is yet another edition of Talk to the Nation, but it's a special one because we're in the month of May, and then many a times people come up with the connotation African Liberation Day. This is a day that is set aside for countries in Africa, people of African descendants, to actually remember the moment that actually was agreed to be they are liberated. Now the bigger question keep flowing in the minds of people: is Africa liberated or not? Today in the studios I have Mr. Chernogay and Mr. Kemo Kante. We will be looking at first, is Africa liberated? But it will be in a debate format, but not the conventional debate that we are used to seeing. You will come up with justifications. You will come up with actually strong reasons for each of the points that they have. So first, as you can see on the screen, Mr. Chernogay will be going up with the motion that Africa is liberated. That is his belief. And Mr. Kemo Kante will be coming up against the motion that Africa is not liberated. Generally, I'll be here to moderate, and then viewers, you will also have your opinion, like we said earlier, that if you also want to send in your view, you can also send it via WhatsApp to 372-7495, 372-7495. As well, you can follow us on our social media handles. I am Kausubaji, and we start with Mr. Gay. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum once again. I'm happy to be here, Kausu. So today we are asking a very fundamental question. We are asking perhaps the most important question that we've been asking for more than half a decade now, for more than half a century now. Is Africa liberated? So I would like to begin first by asking what would liberation mean, right? If we're going to have this debate, then first we must understand the most fundamental part of the debate. What would liberation mean to Africa? Is it political liberation? Is it economic liberation? Is it intellectual liberation? What are we talking about? What kind of liberation are we talking about? I would define liberation for me. It would have to go across the board. It would have to be political, the right to self-determination, getting rid of poverty, not having to depend on foreign aid or other countries or other continents for us to progress. So liberation would mean that Africa as a continent is self-sufficient to handle and deal with its own problems, to champion and lead its own development, but also to make sure peace, security, education, healthcare, agriculture, infrastructural development, that everything is progressing steadily and also by Africans without having to depend on anyone. So this is what African liberation would mean to me. This is what African liberation actually, I believe, is the vision that Nkrumah had, because the issue of African liberation did not start in 1963. No, it started way earlier. Actually, it started 5 years earlier, because in 1958, Nkrumah invited, I think, 8 independent African countries. At the time, there were only eight African countries that had been independent, and he invited them to Accra, Ghana. And this is where the issue of African liberation day started. It started in 1958. So what happened is, in 1963, the OAU was founded in Addis Ababa, and this is where they adopted. They did not start. They did not found. They adopted what Nkrumah has started 5 years earlier, and then accepted 25th of May as African Liberation Day. Right. So is Africa liberated? I am supposed to say Africa is liberated. In a sense, yes, it is, because when Nkrumah founded what he was looking for at the time was to end colonialism. And right now, there is no African country that is colonized. My opponent will argue on the issue of neo-colonialism and the technicality of it, and of course it does exist. But first of all, the main purpose for which African liberation was established was to get rid of foreign occupation of African territorial countries, we had, because this was in 1958, then 1963, Gambia had not attended independence because we came in 1965, right? So, yes, Africa is liberated in that sense. That is, we have African presidents as head of states in their own countries. Because even when we had independence, what happened? We still had the Queen as the head of state. Sadauda was some form of prime minister.
A prime minister.
Right? And so with a lot of other countries as well. Apartheid ended later. It ended in 1994.
Yeah, South Africa.
South Africa. But it is over now, right? So the main purpose for which the African Liberation Day was established, what Nkrumah was fighting for, the general part of it, has been achieved. So in a way, there is a form of liberation. But is that the liberation we're talking about? No, we need more, right? So independence have been attained. What form of independence do we have? Right, because even now, the political spectrum in almost every African country is predicated on what the rest of the world says is right. We borrow, we copy and paste. Do you understand?
I know the COVID-19 will be a very good example, but before we will get to that, actually you've mentioned very important issues. First, what was the actual objective of Kwame and people like him? Yeah, so these are very important issues from 1958 to 1963, yes. And then this had been a prime moment for the then Organization of African Union and now the AU. But also looking at still on the issue, I know like you said, Africa is liberated, but to what degree? Yes, we have attained political liberation. Economically, it's a question mark, but still to a certain degree, because still now African countries are actually taking rates from their own self, getting taxation within the people that they choose to represent them, and this is one form of liberation. But before we get to Mr. Kemo, just to wrap up within 2 minutes, what would you actually want to highlight as your main reason of justifying that Africa is liberated?
So that's where I was coming to. So it has been 63 years since Nkrumah started this. So we are not even celebrating African Liberation Day on the 25th of May. It's not like we are liberated. No, what we are celebrating, we are not celebrating. What we are doing on the 25th of May every year is we are reaffirming our commitment. We are reaffirming the promise we made to ourselves that we are not going to stop until this liberation is achieved. So it is a progressive process. Are we liberated? Is Africa liberated conclusively? No. Are we liberated? We are in the process. Do you understand? So we are not celebrating on the 25th. We are reaffirming our commitment to the liberation of Africa. And this is not just African countries. This is almost every person of African descent, no matter where you find yourself in the world. You can be in Latin America, you can be in the US, you can be in the UK, you can be in Europe, as far as you have African descent, because the same struggle is happening in America. What happened to George Floyd? That is part of African liberation. The Black Lives Matter movement is some form of African liberation movement. Do you understand? So, yes, we are liberated. We are in the process of liberation. But have we achieved it completely? No. Because as long as we live, whatever it is we are doing is not done. So we are in the process. It is not completed. And we are not celebrating African Liberation Day. We are reaffirming our commitment to the liberation of Africa and people of African descent wherever they may be in the world.
Development is a process, said Chernobyl, and we are on the crusade. Mr. Kemo Kande.
Yes.
Indeed, we have heard from Mr. Chernobyl. Important points highlighted, and then he has actually come up with his justifications. Your first 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baji, and then my colleague, and of course, an opponent in this debate, Mr. Chernobyl. It is fascinating to hear from his presentation that he believed at the beginning of the presentation that Africa is liberated. And he used this thing in an adjective term to describe the actual status quo. That is the process. But in the course of the presentation, he said, now we are in the process. So I think the conflict in terms of connecting the process and the completed process has existed here. He has a beautiful start of the presentations by indicating that Nkrumah had a spectacular intention of coming up with Africa that is completely liberated. Nkrumah started the crusade, and this crusade is supposed to be handled by other Africans who perhaps will succeed in Nkrumah. But until today, after 63 or more years, Africa still continue to exist with an umbilical cord from the continent to our former colonies. And this umbilical cord is established in the very fabric of exploitation, coercions, and influence. And this umbilical cord is what needs to be caught here. But as I will affirmatively put forward in my presentation that Africa as a continent is not liberated in any form, first I would like to look at his definition of liberalism in the context of territorial or so-called political or naked political liberations. I wouldn't stop there, but I would also look at human beings that are occupying the African territory, whether they enjoy that liberalism we're talking about even under their own leaders. Because liberalism does not only mean that you are caught the chain of colonial yoke or colonialism, but even under your own leader, whether you are enjoying that liberalism there. That is quite key. And also we look at some of the world institutions, let me call them the Western-led institutions or the Bretton Woods institutions, their continuous exploitation of the African economies in any form. And of course, more particularly, that is the colonial umbilical cord that still exists between France and her overseas territories in the African continent. That also will be explored in my presentation. But first, let's begin with political, so-called political independence we're talking about. Of course, today you will find that no European powers are not in a physical presence in our territories dictating what to do in a policy format or to be governing us directly. But of course, this does not actually mean to be fully liberated. Still, let's explore this thing from the ideological standpoint. Today, many of the ideological issues we are practicing in our territories here are more inspired by the West. One. Secondly, also, we have already kicked aside most of our very key traditional institutions that were used as a governance tool in determining the destiny of Africa. And thirdly, that has to do with economy. If African economy are still fused to the Western economies in an extractive and exploitative and dependent manner, that sends a signal that African liberalism is still facing a monumental question mark, which ought to be tackled with. And that is from the Western perspective, just to make sure that I give the breakdown within these 5 minutes. Let's look at Africa, where the Africans themselves are liberated under African leadership. Because liberalism goes beyond political liberation, it goes beyond colonial fabric, but it also explores whether human beings that are living under political systems within their overseas territory, within their own territories, are liberated. Now, to explore this particular issue, according to Freedom House Studies, this is a European-based institution that looks at how many Africans are living under democracies where they enjoy fundamental freedoms and all what they require as far as their rights and liberties are concerned. It found that substantially, even West Africa to be specific, are now dragging, most of the countries are dragging towards, having leadership that rule with iron fist. Especially we are now seeing, even Senegal is cited as an example now, the gradual descendants of Macky Sall into a kind of leadership where the fundamental freedoms are now put under huge check or under huge restrictions, and all these issues are moving towards having people in a very, very unliberal nature. And then also we looked at the issues happening in other African countries. Even Nkrumah, whom he cited as an example, as he aspired for African liberation. Upon achieving the so-called political independence we always talk about, he instituted another forms of leadership in Ghana, which actually, in fact, sent a signal that Ghanaians still are not free if liberalism has to mean freedom here. He instituted a single-party system where he had to ban other political parties from competing with him, and then he put strong check on all his opponents, and then he actually put the country under a strong iron fist style of leadership. And there are, literally documents that have been produced by even African that are Ghanaian descent that actually unveil Nkrumah's style of leadership. And not only that, we had so-called African leaders who are saying that we are ruled for over 400 years, we are this, we are that, by the European, and they do this, they do this. But they themselves are their people liberated or freed under their own rule. So we are not looking at liberalism from the Western perspective alone, but even within the African show, where we are free under our leaders.
a very big question mark. Then, like you said, it is a monumental question mark. In your own words, if you are actually to define liberation, how would you call it to the context that we are not liberated?
Liberation or liberalism in a context, because if we talk about liberalism, it's of a different thing from liberation. Understand? So liberalism as a political ideology means where individuals are entitled to enjoy their freedom under a system of leadership which in certain instances can interfere in order to provide those needs for them. That is why sometimes under liberalism as a political ideology, we see a state as a necessary evil, for the fact that modern liberals will say that if we said, we are going to stick ourselves to classical liberalism, that simply means that individuals are free to do whatever. But you cannot tell me that you are free if I don't have food to eat. So state has to intervene in order to ensure that we have some basic needs. But state must not act as a dictatorial tentacle that will actually put a strong stop on people's fundamental freedom.
Indeed, regardless of the situation that we have in the country, people will always tell you state are the primary duty bearers. To what degree are they the primary duty bearers? I know people that are viewing, and then probably Mr. Gay and stuff, I would actually come up with that. But Mr. Gay, we have actually take each 5 minutes for the introduction, and now we will give each 10 minutes to actually elaborate more on what we have actually discussed on. Because these are important issues. Young people actually need to understand when we talk about African liberation, what do we actually mean?
What do we mean?
But also, if we are liberated, what can we see as examples that people can actually pick up to say, yeah, X had occurred, Y had occurred, and this is why I believe you have liberated. We are liberated. And if we are not liberated, people should see X, Y, Z to say, as a result of this and that, we are not liberated. We will get to this first part, apart from the introductory part, the first part of the debate proper, where we will take each 10 minutes to actually showcase our points and bring up our justifications.
Of course.
Mr. Gay.
So here we go. So I believe Kemo kind of misunderstood my opening. Because when I talked about liberation in what Nkrumah was talking about, I was talking about getting rid of colonialism, physical colonialism, and that we did. Like you can say me, I actually preempted it. I did say he will talk about the issue of neo-colonialism, which he did, right? Yeah, but the issue of physical colonialism, having people, European in our countries, running our countries, that was one of the major reasons why Nkrumah started what he started. That is what Kwame Nkrumah is known for. Is for championing African independence. Do you understand? In fact, Ghana was like Mecca for African leaders who wanted independence for their countries. Like even Jawara himself went to Ghana. People who were struggling for independence in their countries, they had to go to Ghana. They had to go to see Nkrumah. It was like going Muslim go to Mecca. They had to go there. You have to make the pilgrimage and then sit with him, and then you come back to your country and do your thing. So he did that, and that worked. So in a form that was done. The main objective was done. But is that where the process stopped? No. It wasn't just we are now going to have African president elected by African people. No, it was the right to self-determination. It was that we would be able to fix our problems. It was that we will be able to settle our own issues. In fact, 5 years later, when the OAU was established, purposely because we wanted to have an assembly. We wanted to have a platform where African can come together and settle African problem. So the issue of African liberation is bigger than just independence. It's about uniting all the countries in Africa under the same umbrella to make sure that when one country has a problem, then the entire Africa has a problem. Then we can come together and fix that. And even though this is not working perfectly, because there is no one perfect system, there is no system that is perfect worldwide, but we have seen where these organizations that are created within Africa are trying to solve African problem. A perfect example was this December of 2016. Who took Yahya Jammeh out? It was ECOWAS. Did we wait for UN? No. But the reason why we even have ECOWAS is because OAU is too big. It's supposed to be for the entire Africa. But even at regional level, we have an organization that can help us settle problems. These are part of the liberation that we are talking about. Is it perfect? No. Is it complete? Nowhere close to complete. But do we have small steps that are happening? Do we have things happening signaling that liberation is in the process? Yes. Even though sometimes we take 2 steps forward and then we have our horrible leaders take us 100 steps backwards, right? But this is happening. Also, he quoted something. He was talking about how African regimes are not democratic, and he quoted Freedom House. I think Freedom House, right?
Yeah, Freedom
yeah,
House.
It's a European institute that does research about democracy in Africa. Now, My problem with democracy is, first of all, I don't think democracy is the best form of government. I don't. That is probably going to be a debate for another day. But democracy is not the best form of government. And the hypocrisy of it all is that what is the most famous definition of democracy is from who?
Absolutely.
Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln owned slaves. A man who owned slaves. And if you read the American Declaration of Independence, it started with all men are created equal. If a man whose country was liberated based on all men are equal, but he owned slaves, and then the same man came back to define democracy, what kind of hypocrisy are we talking about? So where are we even picking our ideas from? Who defines democracy? Look, we were not barbaric people. Before these white people came, we had governments. We had courts. We had leaders. We had councils of elders. Do you understand? The richest man in human history is Mansa Musa. He had a well-established government. Even before all these people came, Gambia here, we had our own kings. We had our chiefs. We had our alcalos. We had ways of settling problems. We had our own courts. Do you understand? So it's not like these people came and brought, but then they brought ideas and we picked them. So my question is, Kemo is saying we are having, my opponent here is saying we are having African regimes that an institution called Freedom House is telling us are not democratic. In the UK, we have kings. We have a queen. Do we not?
We do.
Is the queen elected? If that was happening in Africa, they would have called that thing a dictatorship. But we are not calling that thing a dictatorship there. Donald Trump just went out. Everything he did within the 4 years he was in power. How many things did he do that if an African leader had done just once, US, they would have sent their own forces there to go and liberate the people.
Or people would be
exactly. Why are we so quick to judge? He talked about Nkrumah and how Nkrumah became something else. But the issue is this. None of us Africans actually determine what our leaders are. We always take definitions and characteristics from other people. Currently, one of the fastest growing economy in the world, not just Africa, is Rwanda. And they are calling Kagame a dictator. When they were slaughtering his people, for more than 100 days, they killed over 800,000 people in Rwanda. Nobody said anything in the international community. No one. He was in the trenches fighting for his people. Nobody helped him. He liberated them. He came to that country and changed everything. It is peaceful. It is progressing. It is growing. Education is going. Infrastructure, agriculture, everything is growing. But now he's a dictator. He was not a dictator when he was fighting for his people. Where were they?
Probably
when we are fighting for who determines that though?
No.
Who decides?
The people.
Is it no? I want the Rwandan people to call him a dictator. I am okay if the Rwandan people call Kagame a dictator, then that is them. But what I'm not okay with, is some journalists from CNN coming from Washington D.C. and then sitting with him calling him a dictator, or someone from a country that doesn't know anything about Africa or what is happening in their country calling him a dictator. If his people think he's a dictator, let them take him out. I want us to solve our own problems. That is what liberation would mean to me. Like we did with Yaya Jammeh. We were not okay with him. We voted him out. If the Rwandan people think Kagame is a dictator, let them decide and kick him out. Let it not be something that someone from America or Europe would have to say. These are the things that we are fighting for. It's the right to self-determination, right? And yes, we are in the process, but my issue is it is not complete, which is why we are not celebrating, because there's nothing to celebrate. We are reaffirming our commitment to the liberation of our people. I don't know if you've heard about silencing the gun campaign, right? These are things we have to fight against. In the Gambia currently, how many women, I was doing this research because I was helping a friend who had a presentation and I was doing a research on the maternal mortality, right? Because 2 years ago, my mom's sister passed away at this place, at the General Hospital, AFC Small Hospital, right? And the only reason she died was because she gave birth successfully. Nothing happened. The child is healthy. My mom is raising the kid right now. But because she suffered from excessive bleeding after the delivery and there was no blood. The woman died in the only major general hospital in this country because there was no blood. Do you understand? And so I was helping this friend do research. And you know what I did after that? I went to the hospital and registered as a donor. So I'm a registered blood donor because I don't want the same thing to happen to someone else. I'm encouraging other people to do the same as well. If you're healthy and you can donate, please do. Every 3 months you can donate once. But the issue is this. I was helping a friend do research, and you know what the rate is at right now, maternal mortality? For every 90 women that goes into labor in Gambia, one will end up in a casket. For every 90 women. That is thousands of women dying every year, and they die from like simple complications that can be solved with just basic primary healthcare services. It doesn't even require complicated stuff. It's just basic primary healthcare services. If they have, these people can be saved we can cut down more than 80% of the maternal mortality rates in this country. So where is the liberation? So I agree with him. Liberation is not just about getting rid of colonialism, but how are our people progressing? What quality of life do they have under the leadership of our own people?
Sure.
Under the leadership of our own people,
yes.
I guess still you have about a minute if there's any more point.
No, it's like the conversation. We can have this conversation like forever. And also the reason why I'm saying the liberation is happening now is because he made mention of something which I partially agree with. That is, at some point we did let go of most of our traditional and cultural issues, but they're coming back. For example, in the Gambia, we're now reintroducing local languages. Not in all schools, but at Abuko, where I used to live, now they do Pular in school, they do Wolof in school, they do Mandinka, and a couple of other schools are starting it. I have worked with Fode Balde. I was helping him edit a fuller dictionary. Like, he has written more than 3 of them. So by the time the government decides to adopt a national educational policy that introduces local languages, I think Fode Balde is going to be one of the most fundamental people they will ever work with, because I have gone through his work, right? He was, because his Fula and my Fula is different. So he asked me to work with him, where he would say, for example, if something is called this in their Fula, what would be the synonym in my Fula? Because Fula is very diverse, we have different dialects. Yeah. So that's what I was doing with him. And I found out that he has some really interesting work he was doing, right? And not just that, other countries are introducing their local languages in their schools. So this is a form of liberation, because we've realized if the child is learning in Mandinka, then you are cutting like at least 6 to 7 years of their education. Because from grade 1 to 6, kids are learning to read and write, because the language they are taught in is not their language. But if the kids come to grade 1, they already speak in Mandinka. They don't have to spend 6 more years to learn a language. They can just go to 1+1. Like,
but how will they write the language? How will they come up with the alphabet?
That's what I'm saying. All they have to do is the alphabet. But now you don't just have to write the alphabet. They have to tell you what the alphabet means, and then have to start giving you words and interpret it to them. Yeah. But all you have to teach the kids now, if we are using local languages, is, okay, this is the alphabet and this is how you read it. But if, for example, if you write Dala, they know what Dala is. You don't have to show them a photo.
Absolutely.
So we cut their education processes for at least, like, we increase the potential for at least 4 to 5 years.
Important issue, still with the justification that Africa is liberated.
So there are steps taken to liberation, yes.
Actually, key important issues, one of them is getting a regional bloc and sub-regional blocks. And then he had actually highlighted the example of the Gambia in 2016-17, when actually Gambians decided to change the leadership. And then we had the intervention of the ECOWAS, which is a sub-regional body, which had actually came and intervened. And it has not only happened in the Gambia, in Guinea-Bissau and in other countries. Exactly. So that is a step in stone, like he said. It is a process and will probably be there one time, I don't know when you have actually consumed 63 years. But it's better late than never, that's the belief. Mr. Kemo, we will now come to your own part of the 10 minutes. Still on the same content, is Africa liberated or not? Here at Star TV on your program, Talk to the Nation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baji and Mr. Gay, my gentle friend, for putting up those beautiful efforts you've been making with one of our learned senior in this country, Mr. Fode Balde, for coming up with languages. Of course, that would help our young people in order to be able to translate the actual meaning of our educational curriculum to them. I think Fode and deserve comments for that. It is interesting now to get to the conclusion that very many young black, should I say black dudes or black stars, are not thinking from that particular lens. They still have that westernized mindset, thinking that the cultural intrusions have now overtaken them, and as such, they cannot do away from this existing cultural intrusion. Jono talked about something very, very interesting, that liberalism, which can be found in democracy, and he disagreed that democracy is not the best form of government. Of course, it's not the best form of government, but democracy over the years have been proving itself to be the best form of government in most of the countries across the world. So it is not the best. So it has proven itself to be the best form of government. So Indeed, I agree with him that before the coming of democracy or Western style of leadership, we had a system of rulerships in Africa or in Gambia in particular. This has to do with empires, kingdoms, and then many other, organizations that people had to organize themselves in a very civilized format. You remember one scholar was saying this, I think even history affirmed this, that when the first envoys of the Britannic Majesty land in the Gambia, they did not find any virgin territory belonging to no one. What I'm trying to say here is, when European came, the British, when they came to Gambia, they did not found any territory in this country that you can say that it doesn't belong to anyone. All the territories were under the sovereign jurisdiction of the traditional rulers. When they came, they had to contract treaty with these people, contents which they may not even understand. If you look at some of the terms of agreement that were signed between some of these traditional rulers, and because then education was, especially Western style of education, was not much into those traditional rulers. In fact, right before they start educating their kids, they see Western style of education as something that is outlawed, something that is outside their religious fabric, something that is against their own culture, and so forth. So they have a very, very oppositional stance to it. So when they came, they contracted it. But our styles of leadership in those days were very civilized, were based on, right submissions, were based on right coordination, were based on right collaborative communal service works. If you looked at the Sokoto Caliphate, the caliphate that was championed by Sheikh Ousmane Dan Fodio, it had existed a very centralized system of government. In fact, when the British came, they found these well-established empire in an existence, or caliphate in an existence. They end up introducing what is referred to as indirect rule system. Why they introduce indirect rule system? Because they found that these people are already organized. So why should we come and impose our own system on them, which perhaps is going to create another problem for us? In fact, it may threaten our economic interest, because if you understand the objective of the Her Majesty in Africa, particularly in West Africa, she wanted to get more from Africa by spending less. That was the objective of the British colonialism. So all this system had existed. So my question is, after the Britannic Majesty came and established, and we uprooted this thing through anti-colonial struggles by some of our learned elites, or some people who believe to have understand or came to realize the dangers of European intentions or what their plans were. And we believe to have liberated ourselves through that political independence. We didn't go back to our traditional political institutions, which we could have resuscitated, give energy to them back, but rather we still stick to the same European ideologies, and we're still moving with the same system, which actually intruded into our very cultural fabric now. Many of us now are forgetting what actually we should do as far as leadership is concerned. Mansa Kanka Musa, he mentioned, he had existed a very, very centralized system of administration in Mali. He was the richest guy ever. As we know, history clearly stated that. You remember during his pilgrimage to Mecca, in Egypt, in so many other places where he took transit, gold became visible everywhere. According to Ibn Khaldun, one of the greatest historians, he even said gold became visible like sand everywhere. That in fact had to devalue the currency of Saudi Arabia, devalue the currency of Egypt. So that actually shows that, we had generous leaders. We had leaders who were very, very pious. We had leaders who actually were in for the interest of Africa. But where the question mark still exists, are we liberated? Now, as I mentioned clearly, liberalism as an idea or as a concept or as a philosophy cannot be only found in democracy, but yet other system of administration can embody it. Even our traditional African system, we can create that free environment for people in collaboration or in existence with our own norms, values, and traditions, which we believe that has not been serving as a guiding tool as to how we will actually go by our daily activities. So these traditional institutions are quite important. So you were questioning the British monarch. Of course, I'm not a fan of Britain. I will not be here to defend Her Majesty's stance. I know for certain that they have a liberal, they have a limited monarchy where the Queen has to perform only ceremonial functions. The donkey or executive function has to be performed by the Prime Minister Boris and his Parliament and then executive. So I'm not a fan of the British style of administration. But the fact remains this. If we say that we are liberated, let's get back to the French colonies as a case study in this aspect. France had existed or has existed this colonial relationship or this neo-colonial relationship between her and her overseas territories. And as such, the continuous exploitation that has long established to date still continues. Let's look at the statistics.
To what degree?
Let's look at
these
statistics.
14
African states declared independent under France, and these are Benin, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Niger, Togo, Cameroon, South African Republic, Guinea-Bissau, Equatorial Guinea, Chad, Congo, Brazzaville, and Gabon. After gaining their independence, France government acted, by signing pact with them. Then in a group, put them in a group that became known as the compulsory subsidiaries. And this means that those independent states will need to pay 65% of their foreign currency reserves to French treasury and 20% of their financial liabilities. So each colony has 15% left to use from their own money. So you could see even the conflict we have been hearing from and among African leaders with regards to this issue of ECO. Is as a result of some of these, the influence from France when it comes to her relationship with her overseas territories. Because these people, they don't want to dismantle this existing colonial yoke or this colonial sort of a relationship. So this is what need to be uplifted for African liberation and African unity he has been talking about to exist in its fullest. And then currently when you look at the role of the Bretton Woods institution, the IMF, World Bank, and then WTO, World Trade Organization, despite having an African leading the World Trade Organization now, who is a lady from Nigeria, and also having Europeans having taken most of the leadership position in IMF. Because if you read the chart of IMF, it will tell you clearly that the chief of IMF must always be an European. The president of World Bank is always an American. So that tells us that these institutions having their leadership from these countries, and the same institution will have to determine our exchange rate, will have to determine our external reserve, will have to determine our economic relations, will have to come up with economic policies. Well, this actually further subjugated African economies in an extractive and exploitative manner to European economies. Where are we talking about liberalism here? Where are we talking about freedom here? Where are we talking about Africa being liberated here? When Africa still, from an economic standpoint, from intellectual standpoint, from psychological standpoint, still continue to be subdued by Western powers. And what becomes quite interesting in this so-called exploitation is having some so-called eminent or elite Africans who are standing to defend this movement, who are standing to support this system. They are thinking that because most of them are ill-informed, some of them believe to have been educated from the Western standpoint or Western lenses, thinking that this is the best one. Rather than them using their knowledge to devise tools, strategies, method, policies that will suit the African realities, that will be the best African type, so that they can advance our economies, our countries, having a better system of governance, far better than democracy, as Kenya never agreed to it. Yeah, they rather stand by this system. They support this system to the fullest. They think that they are the most civilized, the most educated, the most, So this is Africa mentally itself, mentally from the mental standpoint, we need to, emancipate ourselves. Africa has been at a crossroad. We are between the present and the past. And we need to emancipate the trapping of this unguided destiny. Where are we going? Where is the pathway?
Where is the pathway? We will take an interlude. I think today's break will be with Robert Nesta Marley, who actually said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. And then furthermore, he said, none but ourselves can free our mind. Sure. This is very important. Ñu jël li nga xamantene mom moy music break rek te ñew. Okay, we continue.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. After that short music interlude by Robert Nesta Marley on Emancipate Yourself from Mental Slavery, None But Ourselves, we will continue the debate on a very important topic. Is Africa liberated or not? We know it is not yet the 25th, but we actually fast approaching the 25th of May. And then 2021, we're seeing young people actually coming up with more and more and more platforms, debate platforms, poetics and other things. And this, we believe, these are self-initiative issues. So probably using that, we can actually link it with the song that we've just listened to by Robert Nesta Marley, that we need to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery.
Sure.
But still on the topic, 63 years after the crafting a way forward for Africa to liberate themselves, generally, Mr. Gay is still with the belief that Africa is liberated, or partly liberated, or we are in the process, like he said. We are not celebrating, but
We are reaffirming our commitment to our liberation.
Our liberation.
Yes.
And therefore, it means more. We need to be more proactive.
A lot of work, yeah.
Mr. Gay, we will use the second 10 minutes, and probably that would be the final part before the conclusive
Very
part.
conclusive part. Okay. He has cited a lot of issues. So I'm just because I was noting some of the last things you were saying, which were really important. But when he was talking about the traditional form of leadership we used to have before the white people came, he said we have something like communal service work. So maybe instead of democracy, we can have communal liberalism or something. That could work, right?
That is not political.
Because I grew up in that. At the village, we support each other, okay?
Yeah.
If your neighbor gets sick, everybody in the village comes together, we go help them in the farm. Right? That is caring for each other. So you, like the South Africans would say, Ubuntu, I am because you are, so I cannot if you don't.
Sure.
Right? But yeah, but that's, as I said, that's a debate for another day. But you talked about the issue of the economy. So the issue of neocolonialism, I think even physical occupation is happening in a form sort of. Not even talking about the French. We'll come to the French. That is another issue. Like we have the UN system in the Gambia, for example. I don't know if you've ever worked with them or worked with a project funded by them. They are like an extension of Shaitan and the devil into our work. If you don't believe me, try having an event or an activity funded by the UN system. They dictate everything you do. For example, they will say, fine, we will give you $25,000. But you only
the project is a clear.
no, I'm telling you, we're giving you $25,000, but you're only using it for exactly this. You cannot deviate a dollar from this. Do you understand? But that is designed in a certain way. Do you understand? So what we have is they have this altruistic hypocrisy in the sense that they care about the people. Like right now we have this thing called the Peace Building Fund. Have you heard about the Peace Building Fund?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you know what they do with the Peace Building Fund? They give so-called activists money and say, go and advocate for something. Now they're sending them to the provinces to go to talk to people who are too tired to even listen because they're too hungry, they're too tired, they're too dirty, they're too sick. So how can you advocate for peace, for example, when the people are hungry? Like if you go, let's say you go to Sare Bojo, and you find women who live in a hut and have 1 meal a day. Agriculture is not working anymore because the land is dying and they cannot afford fertilizer. And you want to talk to those people about peace. Those people don't have the energy to fight.
Sure.
Do you understand? If you want peace, feed them. But they have money they are pumping in the name of fighting for peace. But people are too hungry, people are too tired, people are dying in the hospital, but they don't care. Do you understand? Why do you know why it is designed like that? Because they don't want us to have liberation. They don't want us to sustain ourselves. Because this money they're pumping into advocacy, they could have gone and established, help farmers develop irrigation. I come from a village where the river is less than 2 kilometers. My mom goes to the furrow. And until today, like I don't remember the last time I bought a bag of rice. Because that's how much rice they can grow during the rainy season. So maybe if you support those people, if agriculture was supported by these millions they're pumping into advocacy, we would become self-food sufficient and then we will not need them to give us anything. But then if we don't need the UN to give us anything, the UN will become irrelevant. So what they do is they design a system where they give us something to actually depend on them more. They don't want us to work on our own. Do you understand? When you have your kid at home, you teach them how to crawl, you teach them how to walk. You realize as a kid, as the kids learn to to do things for themselves, you stop doing it. Yeah. When the kid is like a month old, you do everything. Absolutely. You change the diaper, you do everything. But as they grow, you allow them to start wearing their own shoes. Mostly they mix it. But you don't help them, you just say, change it. Yeah. You show them how to do stuff. You dress them, you wash them, but then they start doing that also. Okay, dress yourself. most of the time they will probably the shard will be torn, and you will laugh. It's funny, but as they learn to do things, you stop, you stay back. And as they grow, they become independent. Now they can shower on their own, they can put on their clothes, you don't need to wake them up, they can pick up their bag and go to school, you don't have to drop them. But what the UN system is doing, they are refusing to let go. They don't want us to learn to put us on our own shoes. They don't want us to know how to carry our bag and go to school. They want to be dropping us, picking us up. They want to be the one to help us shower and everything, which is why we cannot be liberated. Because this UN, they are the biggest hypocrites ever. The UN, I'm talking about the entire UN system, by the way. Like, altruistic hypocrisy is what they're using. They're pretending they care, but they don't. Because if they did, they would help us take care of ourselves and not put us on the download. That is one issue I wanted us to talk about. And now, on the issue of what is happening to France and its colonies in Africa, I think that is the biggest problem we have. Because right now, it is not just in that sense. If you go to France, if you enter any major museum, not just in France, in Europe itself, all the things that they are most proud of come from Africa.
Sure.
Do you understand? They are things they took from us. So you are right. The issue, the conversation around liberation is way wider than just saying we have an African president elected by African people, right? Which is why I keep repeating the same thing. It is a process. And here is where I come to the issue of what you were saying about, I don't know who you say is the leader of, there's an African head in the, is it?
World Trade
Organization,
yeah,
right? But he's not doing anything. This is where we come back to. Then the question is, what kind of education are our people having? Because if the enemy is teaching you everything you know, he is going to win the battle every single day. Do you understand? Sure. They taught us everything we know, not everything they know. Right, so what kind of education do we have? Because right now, the education we have in the Gambia, for example, let's be particular and very specific about this. The education we have is not delivering. We have graduates with degrees who cannot deliver in the fields that they specialize in school. The education we have in the school cannot be translated into work. Kausu, this conversation has to be extended. I think we'll have to have this again because I am really, really passionate about this. I want to have it as a conversation instead of a debate. That is what I am looking for, right?
Absolutely.
Which is why I'm even though I'm supposed to say we're liberated, I'm citing a lot of the problems.
Absolutely.
Because I want this to be a conversation, an open conversation,
Sure.
right? So I think there's a question of education. What do we teach our people? What do we teach our people? Because, for example, public school in the Gambia, our spirit is killed. We are taught to comply. You're taught to come and sit in class. If you ask too many questions, you are punished. If you do too much stuff, you are punished. Which is why, because the education system is like that in the Gambia, we don't stand up for ourselves. That is why Jammeh was able to do the things he do and nobody said anything. Because everybody is quiet. As long as it's happening to me, yalla bahna. Right? Like, hey, Jammeh NIA just arrested your friend Kausu. Oh, I'm not even arrested, so I'm good. So we don't stand up against injustice because the school system killed our spirit. You don't question a teacher in class, not in public school, not in the Gambia. Until I was in grade 12, if you do something wrong in my school, they will stretch you on a table. So what does that do? It kills your spirit. Even if you see something wrong that is happening, you'll be like, I just want to save myself. And because of this, we cannot stand up ourselves. And this expands because then you graduate from school and then you become a minister. And then the president is horrible, but the school taught you the leader is always right. Don't question him.
Yeah, compliance.
You become a National Assembly member, the same thing. So we need radical people. We need people who will step up to the powers. The education system has to change, right? Because I'm sure this is coming. And finally, I'm just coming I'm trying to conclude. I have so many things to say, but time is an issue. I'll come to the issue of personal responsibility, right? So this is where this is the issue of liberation. Everybody has a part to play. Every single person, the taxi driver, the gate man, the teacher in the classroom, the minister, right? The vendor woman who sells mburu and nyebe at Sibunte Marsadi. Everybody has a role to play. Do you understand? But overall, we don't just have to look at the government as the responsible organ of all of it. No, we are all responsible for our liberation. And every one of us have a role to play. And that role means you have to be responsible not just for yourself, but for the person next to you. Do you understand? So it becomes a responsibility on you to stand up against something that is wrong. This is what we fail to do, which is why something happened for 22 years. And it is still happening because we know what I was expecting when the National Assembly members rejected the draft constitution. I expected us to stand up to those people because that constitution was the most consultative process I've ever been part of. We went out to the province and talked to the people. And these people had the guts to sit in there and tell us it is not in the interest of the people. Which people? We the people who decided what was put in there. I expected us to stand up for ourselves, but we did not. So it's like what happened for 22 years taught us nothing. Where is the liberation? I'm coming back to what he was saying, that it is not just about getting away from the Western powers, but also liberation under our own leaders.
Under our own leaders.
Do you understand? So the education we have needs to change. If we are going to have the liberation we need to teach our people problem solving, critical thinking, how to deal with situation. Forget about passing exams. I know people who have A's in all of their subjects, they cannot do nada. I know people who fail all of their exams, and you put them in a field, put them anywhere on God's green earth, they will make things happen. Sure. You put them in a jungle with an axe, they will chop it all off. Do you understand? But we have been so focused on how many A's do you have? How many credits do you have from WAS? Do you have maths and English? If you don't have maths and English, you cannot go to university.
Then you have to resit.
Do you know how many percent of graduates in the Gambia, people who finish grade 12, do you know how many percent go to university? Less than 5. Because for the past 5 years, between 18 to 15% of all the students that sit to us, only between 15 and 18 have 5 credits. Only 5% of students who sit to us for the past 5 years have 5 credits, including maths and English. So meaning only 5% have requirement of university. That entire 5% is not going to university because more than half of those people, their parents cannot afford university education. Do you know why? Because the average GDP in this country is $47,000. The average Gambian makes $47,000 per annum. I am studying law. Do you know how much I pay a year? $41,600. How the hell can my family afford to pay my university?
How the hell can my family afford to pay the university?
We are not liberated.
We are not fully liberated.
No. The process is on though. So as I said, we are not celebrating. We are reaffirming our commitment to the struggle.
Sure.
We will take another 5 minutes with Kemo, and probably that will be the final 5 minutes, and then we will come to the conclusion.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kemo, he had said it, that we are not fully liberated. You've also said that we are not fully, for us to be fully liberated, we need to work things out. Yeah. Yes, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, General. That was a very honest affirmation from your side, and I think I fall in love with that. It is true that we are not liberated. Perhaps we are on the pathway of achieving total emancipation from the yoke of colonial grip, which has been manifested in every aspect of our life. But he mentioned certain things here which is very, very important. A vulnerable, poor woman, or poor lady, or poor man in the village of Sara Bojo, or Badibu, or Jara, or Keang, having to go so many hardships, and then UN coming up saying that this is the best way for you to emancipate yourself from poverty. And then they will dictate the strategy as to how you get yourself out of poverty. Look, Gambia here, and sometimes I tend to question our peace. Because when we talk about peace, what always comes to people's mind is that when there is no direct total military confrontation, people are not using guns against each other, then we have in peace. No, peace goes beyond that very fabric. This is referred to, in the absence of violence, it is called negative peace. But we need positive peace. And positive peace can be achieved if we are able to resolve the underlying issues that can result to negative peace. Among those things is poverty, disease, hunger, and so many other things that is happening in this country. How many Gambians are living below $1 a day? How many Gambians are going to bed without a proper meal? This is the question that needs to be addressed. And this can be addressed by who? Gambian themselves. Gambian themselves. Sure. Another important thing that we have to look at is the education system, as Chona beautifully mentioned. You see, our education system, young people has been fed with informations that are not reflective with their own realities in our education system. Telling me if you don't have English language credit, you cannot do law, I think this is myopic. Telling me if you don't have mathematics, you cannot even be enrolled in University of the Gambia, that is myopic. The issue remains this. I have a friend whom I graduated with in New York Senior Secondary School. This guy got 5 A's, 2 credits with failing maths. He went for private was failing maths. He went again, failing maths. He cannot go to university. He had to go and boost this online course. Today, this boy is making tremendous changes in this country. So the point remains this. Why are you trying to deny? In fact, we are talking about fundamental human right here. I think this guy's education system has been interrupted by what? That's the agency, the institution that should have protected or uphold that right. That is the state itself. Yeah. Because the state allowed the education system to have some sort of rules, some sort of regulations that are not even beneficial to our learners themselves. In Europe, especially in the UK, my cousins left here 3 months back. They told me that from grade 1 up to grade 6, they don't even have this formal exam we are doing here. Because they believe that exam itself brings anxiety, stress, especially to a kid who is between the age of 7 to 10. So you don't have to compel them. They have these petty tests and other things that will, encourage them to do better. But this kind of education system where, and if you look at is our curriculum itself reflective with our realities? We need to question all those things. So many things we can talk about. In order to talk about liberation, in order to talk about independence, in order to talk about self-determinations, issues that are intrinsic within our own realities need to be uprooted, and they have to be replaced with what we can presume to be our own identity. And I think we need to work towards that.
Indeed, it is a very interesting moment, but time is our greatest enemy. I know we will actually use this time, each 2 minutes, as I am actually signaled that we have 4 minutes. Each will use 2 minutes to actually conclude. First with Mr. Gay.
All right. Thank you very much, Kausu, and thank you very much. Kemo is we've been debating against the growth since 2016. It has been fun, but I think this wasn't exactly. I think this was more like a conversation, and it was an honest conversation. I like that because we are able to agree on a couple of things. Because as I said, this should be more of a conversation than a debate, because it's a conversation we need to have as a people, right? It's a conversation we need to have as a people. So we are in the process, but I would ask that anybody, wherever you are, work towards what we are doing, especially the government, because the education system has to change. I am really not in for exams. It's a violation of fundamental human rights and all of those things. So I think first we need to change our education system. We need to change the way people think. We need to change the way people perceive themselves and perceive their government. But also when you are put in place where a position that you vie for, ask people to give you a chance to serve them. When you get in that place, you should serve them. And what that means is whether you're a National Assembly member, a minister, or a president, or you are in local government, wherever it is, make sure whatever you do, it is in the interest of the people. But also we as people, ordinary individuals, must be able to stand up and fight for our own liberation. Because Ubuntu, I am because you are. If I am not free, you are not free.
Sure.
Yeah.
I am because you are, Mr. Kemo, finally.
Sure. That Ubuntu philosophy need to be entrenched in Africa. I think the whole thing goes beyond the mere imagination of political independence, but it has to encompass political independence, it has to encompass intellectual independence, it has to encompass the issue of psychological independence. And I think this is very key as far as African development is concerned. There has been a long-standing debate between development theories and then modernization theories. And they tend to blame each other for certain things that set back Africa. The dependency theorists would say that Africa, the West, because of you, so and so happened to Africa. I mean, the dependency will further to say that Africa should not have gone through your style of leadership, the European style of leadership. They shouldn't have been subjugated by the West. I mean, you came to Africa, the West, you tied our economies, especially a country like Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, whose economy was tied with the economy of Belgium in an extractive and exploitative manner. You take African gold, you take so many things from Africa, you dismantle our then existing traditional political institutions and so many other. You input certain things here that are not in our favor. But then the modernization theories will say, no, African, you are responsible for your own problem. Your leaders, they overstay in power, they have iron fist leadership on you, and then they siphon your resources, which they will later put into European banks or American banks, and they will use it for their myopic interest. But the fact remains this, Africa is now saying that we are striving very well, we are getting better education, but yet our education system, or the knowledge that we presume to be getting at our developments, they are not parallel. They seem to be like, moving towards opposite direction. As we are getting more educated in our own perspective, the more underdeveloped we are becoming. So what we perceive to be development is not about having these structures that we are seeing, but it's about ourselves. Are we understanding our realities? Are we coming up with things that reflect our very own reality? How do we fix our problem? How do we fix our youth unemployment? How do we fix our education system? How do we fix our health system? How do we fix our political system? How do we fix, in fact, our leadership style? So that will actually help Africa to realize its objective. But unfortunately, this is not forthcoming.
unfortunately, this is not forthcoming. I will use this opportunity to seriously apologize to those who had actually sent in their short videos. We have actually used the time beyond we expected, and as a result, we will not play your videos. Serious apology. That is why we didn't play your videos. Serious apologies for that. But still, the conversation will continue. I think actually Cherno had actually given me another idea. Instead of calling it a debate, now the Talk to the Nation would actually come up with a national discourse.
A conversation.
And the national discourse would actually be in a conversational format where we will look at things from a perspective, and it will be in series where we will have episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and then probably this can also give act as a wake-up call for our leaders and people also who actually choose representatives. Sometimes I don't call them leaders, I prefer calling them representatives. But those who are actually representing us and those of us who are also choosing our representatives should actually be on a common understanding that this is why I am contracting X to you and this is what I expect from you. Big thanks to the technicians in the control room, the cameramen. Thank you so much for actually being here to serve the Gambian people, but also people outside the Gambia. It was a Talk to the Nation episode here at Star TV on a key topic, is Africa liberated or not? Actually have come to a conclusion that Africa is in the path of for liberation, but not fully liberated. I am your host, Kausobaji. See you another Sunday. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.